My son-in-law had absolutely no idea that I owned the company paying his six-figure salary. To him, I was just another broke old contractor in dusty work boots and paint-stained jeans. Then he had the audacity to slide that nursing home brochure across his dining room table. And 5 minutes later, his entire world shattered into a million pieces. My name is Richard Thompson. I'm 58 years old, and that night taught me something I'll never forget. Sometimes the most powerful weapon you can carry isn't visible at all. It's the truth that nobody sees coming. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. You see, Marcus Bennett thought he had me completely figured out. Poor old Richard barely scraping by in that tiny house on Cedar Lane, driving around in a 15-year-old Ford pickup that sputtered and coughed at every stoplight, clipping coupons at the grocery store like his life depended on saving 50 cents on bread. What Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't have possibly imagined in his wildest dreams, was that his luxurious lifestyle, that sprawling marble mansion he loved to show off, his prestigious position as CEO of Thompson and Associates Construction, all of it, every single piece of his perfect life, existed because of an investment I'd made 25 years ago when I was just a young contractor with calloused hands and big dreams. Back in those days, Marcus's father, William Bennett, was running his construction company straight into the ground. Gambling debts that kept piling higher and higher, business deals that fell apart one after another. Payroll he couldn't meet while his workers waited desperately for paychecks that never came on time. I was 33 years old then, had saved every single penny from years of backbreaking work, and I saw something everyone else missed. I saw an opportunity hidden in the rubble of William's failures. I bought 51% of that dying company for what felt like an absolute fortune at the time. Every dollar I'd ever earned, every sacrifice I'd ever made, all poured into that one decision. Today, that investment is worth approximately $800 million. But here's the thing that might surprise you. I never told anyone about it. Not a single soul. Not even Emma, my precious daughter. My late wife, Catherine, and I, we made a pact, shaking hands over our kitchen table late one night. We agreed that our girl should carve her own path in this world, build her own dreams, not coast through life on daddy's money or rely on a fortune she didn't earn. Maybe that decision was a mistake. Maybe I should have told Emma the truth before she married Marcus. Before she fell in love with a man who looked down on her father like I was nothing more than dirt under his expensive Italian shoes. But hindsight is always crystal clear, isn't it? Let me take you back a few days to when this whole nightmare began to unfold. I was in my garage, oil up to my elbows, working on rebuilding an old engine that most people would have thrown away years ago when my phone started ringing. It was Emma calling, and something in her voice sounded off immediately. Kind of strained, kind of rehearsed, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. "Dad," she said, and I could hear her swallowing hard. "Marcus wants to invite you for dinner Friday night. He thought it would be nice to have a family dinner with his parents there too." Now, let me tell you something. Marcus's parents had never, not once in the 5 years since the wedding, wanted me anywhere near their precious dinner table. Last Christmas, his mother Patricia actually moved my place setting into the kitchen because she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, that the dining room was reserved for family only. As if I wasn't the father of the woman her son married. As if my blue-collar hands might somehow contaminate their fine china. But when your daughter calls, when you hear that tremor in her voice that tells you she's caught in the middle of something she doesn't understand, you show up. Even when every instinct is screaming that you're walking straight into a trap. The thing is, I'd been hearing whispers through the grapevine. Construction is a surprisingly small world, and word travels faster than you'd think. Marcus had been making grand promises about some massive riverfront development project, standing in front of investors with his PowerPoint presentations, telling them this deal would set the company up for generations to come, that their children's children would thank them for getting in on the ground floor. Problem was he needed one specific piece of land for the access road. Just one stubborn property owner who refused to sell no matter how high the offers went, and that single piece of land was holding up his entire billion-dollar dream. That stubborn property owner was me. My modest house on Cedar Lane sat right exactly where Marcus wanted to build his grand entrance to the development, the impressive gateway that would make investors weak in the knees. He just had no idea, not even the slightest clue, that the house he was cursing about in board meetings, calling it an eyesore and a roadblock, belonged to his wife's supposedly worthless father. I've been watching his frustration grow for months now, watching him unravel bit by bit. Through my attorney, David Marshall, I kept careful track of company business without Marcus ever knowing that the majority shareholder, the man who truly controlled his fate, was the same deadbeat father-in-law he complained about at cocktail parties. David would call me with updates, his voice always professional and measured, and I'd hear about Marcus's increasingly desperate attempts to secure funding, his elaborate promises to investors that were getting harder and harder to keep, his growing panic about this one mysterious property that was destroying everything he'd planned. Some old fool living in a run-down shack, Marcus had told the board, according to David's detailed reports. Won't even consider our offers, no matter how generous we make them. Claims the house has been in his family for decades, and he'll die before he sells. Sentimental nonsense holding up progress. If only Marcus knew that old fool was sitting 20 feet away from him every Christmas, eating reheated turkey in the kitchen because he wasn't deemed worthy enough for the dining room. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better? Stay with me, because what happened next at that dinner will leave you speechless. Friday evening arrived with November's early darkness settling over the city like a heavy blanket. I pulled on my best shirt, the navy blue one without any paint stains or tears, and climbed into my beat-up truck. The engine coughed and sputtered before finally turning over, and I drove through the familiar streets toward Marcus's mansion in Westfield Estates. The house was one of those modern architectural nightmares, all white marble and massive floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of place that screams, "I have more money than taste, and I want everyone within a 5-mile radius to know it." Every light in the house was blazing, making it look like some kind of beacon of wealth in the gathering dusk. Marcus opened the door wearing a suit that probably cost more than my truck was worth. He didn't smile, didn't even try to pretend this was a pleasant social occasion. "Richard," he said flatly, my name sounding like an insult in his mouth. "Come in. We've all been waiting for you." The way he said, "waiting," made it clear I'd committed some kind of social crime by arriving exactly on time. The dining room had been set up like a corporate boardroom, cold and intimidating. Marcus's parents, William and Patricia Bennett, sat at one end of that massive mahogany table looking like judges about to deliver a death sentence. They both had that same expression, a mixture of pity and disdain that wealthy people reserve for those they consider beneath them. Emma was there too, my sweet girl, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. She stared down at her plate like it held the secrets of the universe. And that single gesture told me everything I needed to know about whose side she'd been pressured to take in whatever nightmare was about to unfold. "Sit down, Richard," William commanded, pointing to a chair at the far end of the table, as far from the family as possible. At 74 years old, William still carried himself like the big shot he used to be, back when his construction company was hemorrhaging money faster than water through a sieve, and he was desperate enough, broken enough, to accept a buyout from a 33-year-old contractor he'd never even met face to face. The irony of this moment wasn't lost on me. This man who was about to lecture me about financial responsibility, about facing reality and making smart decisions, had once gotten down on his knees and actually begged for the money that saved his family's business from complete ruin. But we'd never met in person back then. All our dealings had gone through lawyers and carefully constructed shell companies. He had no idea the anonymous investor who'd saved him was sitting right here, about to be treated like garbage. We ate in heavy, uncomfortable silence. The food was expensive, probably cost more per plate than I spent on groceries in a week, but it tasted like cardboard in my mouth. Every bite was difficult to swallow past the lump forming in my throat. Patricia kept making pointed comments, little poisoned arrows disguised as concern. "People our age really need to start thinking about the future," she said, cutting her steak with surgical precision. We have to face reality about our limitations. Pride can be dangerous when it stops us from accepting help we desperately need. I just nodded and ate my overpriced dinner, waiting to see where this theatrical performance was headed. Because that's what it was, a carefully rehearsed show with every line delivered on cue. Emma picked at her food like a bird, barely eating anything. Every now and then she'd glance at me with something that might have been guilt flickering in her eyes, but not enough guilt to speak up, not enough love to defend her own father. The small talk felt forced and artificial, like bad actors reading lines they'd memorized but didn't believe. Marcus talked about work stress, about challenging market conditions, and difficult property acquisitions that were keeping him up at night. Patricia complained about inflation and how everything cost so much these days. This from a woman who probably hadn't looked at a price tag in 30 years. William lectured about the younger generation not understanding the value of hard work, the sacrifice, the dedication it takes to build something meaningful. I sat there listening to all of it, thinking about the quarterly reports David had shown me just last week. Thompson and Associates Construction was actually doing remarkably well, posting record profits. But Marcus was spending money like it was water, trying desperately to prove he could think big and deliver results that would make the board worship him. Without that access road through my property, without that final piece of his elaborate puzzle, the entire riverfront development would collapse like a house of cards. And Marcus's reputation, his credibility, his future in the company, everything would crumble with it. Finally, after we'd finished the main course and the plates had been cleared away, Marcus reached under his chair with theatrical flourish. He pulled out a thick manila folder, the kind lawyers use for important documents, and slid it across that polished table toward me like a dealer in a poker game who thought he held all the aces and was about to clean out the table. "Richard," he said, his voice taking on that practiced authority he used in business meetings, that tone that said he was used to people obeying him without question, "we need to have a serious conversation about your future, about what's best for everyone involved." I opened the folder slowly, my hands steady, even though my heart was pounding. Inside were glossy brochures for something called Sunset Haven, featuring pictures of elderly people playing checkers and shuffleboard, smiling those empty smiles of people who'd given up and accepted their fate. Underneath the brochures were legal documents, pages and pages of them. Power of attorney forms with blank signature lines waiting for my name. Property transfer papers. Guardianship applications already filled out and ready to file. My hands started trembling as the full scope of their plan became clear. "Your house is becoming a significant financial burden for this family," Marcus continued, leaning back in his chair like a CEO delivering quarterly results to disappointed shareholders. "We simply can't continue subsidizing your lifestyle indefinitely. It's not sustainable, and frankly, it's not fair to Emma and our children." That was interesting considering I've been paying my own property taxes for 25 years, fixing my own leaky roof, patching my own driveway, doing every bit of maintenance myself because I'd never asked them for a single dollar. But I let him keep talking. Sometimes the best strategy, the smartest move you can make, is to let your enemy dig his own grave deeper and deeper while you watch. What they said next crossed a line I never thought my own family would cross. The betrayal was about to cut deeper than any knife ever could. William leaned forward across the table, his thick gray mustache twitching the way it always did when he was nervous. I remembered that tell from the old days from the reports David had shown me, though William had no idea we'd ever done business together. No idea I'd seen him at his absolute lowest point. "The sale of your property would solve multiple problems simultaneously, Richard," William said in that condescending tone that made my blood boil. "It would address our immediate cash flow concerns and provide a substantial nest egg for your care at Sunset Haven. When you really think about it objectively, it's a win-win situation for everyone involved." "Cash flow concerns?" I asked, keeping my voice mild and curious, like I was just trying to understand. I thought the company was doing well. Marcus's face flushed slightly above his expensive silk tie, a deep red creeping up his neck. "The company is facing some temporary setbacks," he said carefully, choosing each word like he was walking through a minefield. "We need capital for the riverfront development project. Your property, Well, your property sits in a location that would significantly benefit the entire community, not just our company. It's actually quite strategic. Now, we were getting to the real truth, the ugly heart of this whole setup. This wasn't about my welfare or their generous concern for my well-being. This was about my house sitting on land they desperately, urgently needed for their billion-dollar development dream. The project that would make Marcus look like a genius and secure his position for years to come. Patricia smiled, that artificial smile wealthy people perfect over years of practice. The smile they use when they're about to destroy you for your own good. Sunset Haven really is a lovely facility, Richard, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. You'd have your own private room, scheduled activities to keep you engaged, professional medical care around the clock. At our age, independence becomes a luxury we simply can't always afford, no matter how much we might want to cling to it. At our age, like she and I were in the same situation, facing the same challenges. Like she'd ever worried about paying for groceries or keeping the heat on during a brutal winter. This woman who hadn't washed her own dishes in 30 years, who probably didn't even know where the kitchen was in her own house, was lecturing me about accepting reality and being practical. I looked at those brochures again, flipping slowly through photos of smiling elderly people in cardigan sweaters, reading large print books in sterile common areas, being pushed around in wheelchairs by cheerful young staff members who were paid minimum wage to pretend they cared. It was the kind of place where families dumped their inconvenient elderly relatives with clean consciences and monthly payment plans, then visited twice a year on major holidays. What if I don't want to sell? I asked quietly. The temperature in that dining room seemed to drop 10 degrees in an instant. You could feel the atmosphere change, feel the predators circling closer. William cleared his throat, the sound harsh and sharp in the sudden silence. Then we'd have to consider other options, he said, and there was steel beneath his words now, a threat barely disguised as concern. Legal options that we'd rather avoid, but will pursue if necessary. We're genuinely concerned about your mental capacity, Richard. Living alone in that big house at your age, with no family nearby to check on you regularly, to make sure you're taking your medications, eating properly, not leaving the stove on. It's simply not safe anymore. Marcus picked up the thread smoothly, like they'd rehearsed this whole conversation. We'd have to petition the court for guardianship, he said, his voice matter-of-fact, like he was discussing quarterly earnings. Bring in medical experts who could testify that you're no longer competent to make sound financial decisions, that you're potentially a danger to yourself and possibly others. The courts take these things very seriously, especially in cases involving elderly individuals living alone. The threat hung in air like smoke from a burning building, thick and choking. These people, my own family, were willing to have me declared mentally incompetent, willing to have me locked away in a memory care unit like I had dementia. Also, they could steal my property for a real estate deal that would make them even richer than they already were. The court would have to appoint a guardian, Patricia added helpfully, her eyes cold despite her smile. Someone responsible to look after your interests, make sure you get the care you need. Someone who understands what's truly best for you, even if you can't see it yourself right now. Emma finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper, so soft I almost couldn't hear her. Dad, it really is for the best, she said, and I could see her hands shaking in her lap. You're getting older, and we worry about you in that big house all alone. The neighborhood isn't what it used to be. There are break-ins, crime. We just want you to be safe and cared for. Her voice cracked on those last words, and I could see she'd been crying earlier. Her eyes were red and puffy beneath her makeup, but she was still saying the words anyway, still choosing their side over mine, still betraying her own father because her husband had convinced her it was the right thing to do. We need the money from the sale, she continued, still not meeting my eyes, staring at some point on the wall behind my head. For our future, for our children's education fund, for the family's future. You understand that, don't you, Dad? You've always put family first. That phrase, the family's future, hit me like a physical blow to the chest, knocked the breath right out of my lungs. Here was my daughter, my little girl who I taught to ride a bike and helped with her homework and walked down the aisle on her wedding day, telling me that stealing my home robbing me of my independence and dignity, was necessary for her family's future. A future that apparently didn't include respecting her own father. Marcus pulled out a gold pen, the kind that costs more than most people make in a week, and set it on the table next to those documents with a soft click that sounded like a cell door closing. "This is really very straightforward, Richard," he said in that reasonable tone people use when they're trying to convince you that surrendering everything is actually in your best interest. "You sign the power of attorney, I handle all the complicated paperwork for the sale, and you move to Sunset Haven next month. They have a transition team there who will help you settle in, help you adjust to your new routine. Make it as easy as possible. Everyone wins. Everyone gets what they need." I stare at those papers, then slowly raise my eyes to look at the four faces around that table. For people who thought they had me completely cornered, trapped like a rat with no escape route. For people who believed that a tired old contractor had no choice but to surrender everything he'd worked for, everything he'd built, because they needed his property for their grand ambitions and their comfortable future. They were wrong about so many things, but they were especially catastrophically wrong about how much fight this old contractor still had left in him. Why did next, what I revealed in that moment, would change everything. The masks were about to come off, and the truth was going to hit them like a freight train. "You know," I said slowly, reaching into my jacket pocket with deliberate care, "there's something I should probably tell you about that property situation. Something that might change your perspective on this whole conversation." I pulled out my phone, the old cracked one that made them assume I couldn't afford better, that reinforced every stereotype they had about poor old Richard struggling to get by. I dialed a number I knew by heart, a number I called 100 times over 25 years. The room went absolutely dead quiet as I hit the speaker button. You could have heard a pin drop on that expensive marble floor. "David Marshall speaking," came the crisp, professional voice through the phone's speaker, clear as a bell in that silent dining room. Marcus actually laughed, a short bark of genuine amusement. "Who are you calling, Richard? Your nephew? Some buddy from your construction crew? This isn't going to change anything." "David," I said calmly, ignoring Marcus's smirk, ignoring the way Patricia rolled her eyes. "Are you available?" "Yes, Mr. Thompson," David replied, his voice perfectly professional. "How can I assist you this evening?" The silence that followed was absolutely beautiful, one of the most satisfying moments of my entire life. You could have heard a heartbeat in that room. Tony's laugh died in his throat, like someone had reached down and strangled it. Patricia's fork froze halfway to her mouth, a piece of expensive dessert forgotten. William went pale above his perfectly knotted tie, all the color draining from his face like water down a drain. "Mr. Thompson?" Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. He looked like someone trying to solve an impossible puzzle, his face cycling through confusion and the first hints of real fear. "What? Why did he call you Mr. Thompson?" "Activate Clause 17 of the shareholder agreement." I continued calmly, each word dropping into the silence like stones into still water. "Immediate freeze on all Thompson and Associates construction assets, pending emergency board review. And prepare the termination papers for the current CEO, effective immediately." "Certainly, Mr. Thompson," David replied without hesitation. "Shall I schedule the emergency board meeting for Monday morning?" 9 a.m. sharp, I said. "Full board attendance is mandatory. No exceptions. Consider done, sir. Is there anything else you need this evening?" "Not tonight, David. Thank you." I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my jacket pocket with hands that weren't shaking anymore, not even a tremor. For faces stared at me like I just pulled a gun and announced I was robbing the place, like reality itself had just shattered and they were standing in the ruins trying to understand what had happened. Marcus shot to his feet so fast his chair scraped against the marble with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard, harsh and jarring. His face was cycling through emotions too quickly for any single expression to take hold. Confusion, disbelief, raw panic, and something that might have been the first stirrings of genuine terror. "Thompson and Associates," he stammered, his voice breaking. "But how do you know about Clause 17? How do you even know about the shareholder agreement? That's confidential board information. How could you possibly?" I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 58 years in my joints, in my back, and my tired bones. But I also felt more powerful than I had in decades, more alive than I'd felt since Catherine passed away. Because 25 years ago, I said, my voice steady and clear, when your father's company was circling the drain due to his gambling, debts, and spectacularly terrible business decisions, when the bank was about to foreclose and the creditors were circling like vultures, I used every single penny I'd saved from 15 years of construction work to buy a 51% controlling interest. I saved this company when nobody else would touch it, when everyone else saw it as a lost cause. William made a choking sound like someone had just punched him in the stomach and knocked all the air from his lungs. Patricia's perfect makeup couldn't hide the gray pallor spreading across her face like a shadow, couldn't disguise the shock and horror in her eyes. The company you've been running, Marcus? I continued, and I could hear my own voice getting stronger, more confident with every word. The salary you've been collecting? The corner office with your name on the door in gold letters? The company car, the expense account, the country club membership? It all exists, every single piece of it, because I wrote the check that saved your family's business when nobody else in this entire city would touch it with a 10-foot pole. I picked up that nursing home brochure and held it up so everyone could see the smiling elderly people on the cover, those false promises of dignity and care. Currently, I said, my voice cutting through the shocked silence, my stake in Thompson and Associates Construction is worth approximately $808 million, which makes me, not you, Marcus, not your father, William, but me, the real boss of the company that pays for this house, that funds your extravagant lifestyle, and employs everyone whose opinion you value more than your own wife's father's dignity and independence. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my situation. And if you've dealt with something similar, if you've been underestimated or betrayed by family, share your story. You're not alone in this. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life, because sometimes the people who love us need to be reminded that we're worth more than they think. Marcus collapsed back into his chair like someone had cut the strings holding him upright, like a puppet with no puppeteer. The sound he made wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a sob, more like the noise a balloon makes when air escapes too quickly, desperate and lost. You, he breathed, his eyes wide with dawning horror. You're the anonymous partner, the silent investor, the majority shareholder we've been trying to impress for months. The one who has to approve the riverfront project. The one you've been desperately trying to impress. I finished for him, watching him unravel. The one whose approval you've been seeking for the past year. The one whose funding you need to make your grand riverfront project successful, to secure your legacy. I ripped that brochure in half, then in half again, letting the torn pieces flutter down onto his expensive china plate like confetti at a funeral. And now, I said quietly, the one who knows precisely how you treat elderly family members when you think they have no power to fight back, when you think they're completely at your mercy. The confrontation was far from over. What happened at that emergency board meeting would determine not just Marcus's future, but the future of everyone sitting at that table. Emma was staring at me with her mouth open, her face showing a mixture of shock and something that might have been the beginning of understanding, the first crack in the wall of lies Marcus had built around her. Dad, she whispered, tears streaming down her face now, no longer bothering to hide them. You own Thompson and Associates? You've owned it this whole time? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you ever say anything? I don't just own it, sweetheart, I said gently, feeling my heart break for her even in this moment of victory. I am Thompson and Associates. I have been for 25 years. Your mother and I decided you should make your own way in the world, build your own life, not coast on money you didn't earn. We wanted you to be strong and independent. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe I should have told you the truth before you married someone who would look down on your father like he was dirt beneath expensive shoes. Marcus tried to stand again, his legs shaky like a newborn calf trying to walk for the first time. His voice cracked when he spoke. Richard, please, you have to understand. I was just trying to help, trying to find you a nice place where you'd be comfortable, where you'd have people to look after you properly. The riverfront project, it would benefit everyone, the whole community. Think of all the jobs it would create. Save it, I said quietly, but there was steel in my voice now. You just threatened to have me declared mentally incompetent so you could steal my property. You recruited my own daughter to betray me, to participate in elder abuse. You conspired with your parents to commit what amounts to criminal fraud. Don't you dare stand there and pretend this was about my well-being. William finally found his voice, though it came out weak and desperate. Richard, surely we can work something out. The project is good for the company, good for all the shareholders, good for everyone involved. You must see the bigger picture here. We're talking about hundreds of jobs, millions in economic development. Oh, I see the picture perfectly clearly, I said. The emergency board meeting will be Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp. I suggest you spend the weekend preparing your resignation letter, Marcus, and finding yourself a very good employment attorney, because after Monday, you're going to need one badly. You might also want to start looking at your own housing options, because the company house comes with the CEO position. Patricia tried one last desperate gambit, her voice taking on that pleading quality that rich people use when they realize their money can't fix everything. Richard, please think about Emma. Think about your grandchildren's future. This project could set them up for life, create generational wealth. Don't you want that for your family? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, saw the tears streaming down her face, saw the woman she'd become under Marcus's influence. I am thinking about Emma, I said softly. I'm thinking about her more than any of you ever have. I'm saving her from a husband who would sell his own family for a bonus check and a pat on the back from the board. I'm showing her what real character looks like, what real strength means. Sometimes love means protecting people from their own mistakes. The next few days were some of the most interesting of my entire life. Marcus tried everything he could think of, calling my phone 50 times a day, sending text messages, even showing up at my house at 6 in the morning with coffee and donuts from that expensive bakery downtown, begging me to reconsider, to think about the family, to remember all the good times we'd had together. But I was done talking. Some bridges, once burned, can't ever be rebuilt no matter how much water you pour in the ashes. Monday morning came crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day that makes you grateful to be alive. I put on my best suit, not the one I wore to church on Sundays, but the real one, the custom-tailored one I kept for the quarterly board meetings I attended through video conference from David's office, the one that cost more than Marcus's car payment. Thompson & Associates Construction Headquarters was a 35-story tower of glass and steel in the heart of downtown, built with profits from projects I'd approved over the past 25 years. David met me in the lobby at 8:45 sharp, his briefcase containing 25 years of financial records, the audio recording from Friday night's dinner, and documentation that would strip away every lie Marcus had built his career on. The board is assembled and waiting, Richard, David said as we rode the elevator to the 35th floor. His face was serious, but I could see a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. They're all very interested to finally meet their majority shareholder in person. Some of them have suspected for years that something wasn't adding up. The boardroom was everything you'd expect from a successful company. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, a conference table that could seat 20 people, leather chairs that cost more than most people's annual salary. 10 board members rose when I entered, their faces showing various degrees of surprise, recognition, curiosity, and what looked like genuine relief. These were good people, mostly. Minority shareholders, experienced contractors, and business partners who've been growing increasingly worried about Marcus's leadership over the past year. They'd heard rumors about financial irregularities, about questionable decisions being made without proper board approval, about a CEO who seemed more interested in his own legacy than in sound business fundamentals. At the far end of the table, Marcus and his father sat like defendants waiting for sentencing. Marcus had tried to dress the part of a confident executive, but his skin held the gray pallor of a man who hadn't slept in 3 days. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to organize papers in front of him. William looked every one of his 74 years. His proud posture collapsed into something that resembled defeat and resignation. "Good morning," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table with the same natural authority I'd once used to run construction crews, to command respect for men who'd worked in this industry for decades. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I know you're all very busy, and I appreciate you making time for this emergency meeting." David activated the wall-mounted screen behind me. Suddenly, the entire room was looking at an enlarged photograph of that nursing home brochure, its cheerful lies magnified for everyone to see in high definition. Beside it appeared copies of the property transfer documents, the guardianship applications, all time-stamped from Friday evening. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady and clear. "This past Friday evening, your CEO and his family attempted to defraud the majority shareholder through elder abuse, coercion, and conspiracy to illegally seize private property worth approximately $12 million. They threatened to have me declared mentally incompetent if I refused to sign over my home." The silence in that room was profound and heavy. Board member Susan Richardson leaned forward, her face registering the kind of shock that hardens quickly into cold fury. Michael Torres, whose construction crews had built half the south side of the city, shook his head slowly in disgust, his jaw clenched tight. I walked them through everything methodically, leaving nothing out. The fake dinner invitation designed to put me at ease. The nursing home brochure presented as a done deal. The threats to have me declared mentally incompetent and locked away. The conspiracy to steal my property for the riverfront development that Marcus had been promising investors for months. David played selected audio clips from the recording device I'd worn Friday night. Marcus's voice filled that boardroom, confident and cruel, as he threatened an elderly man with forced institutionalization. His words echoed off the walls. "You're no longer competent, a danger to yourself. We'll have the courts appoint a guardian. Your CO threatened to have me locked in a dementia ward where I would," and I quote directly from the recording, "spend my last years drooling and forgotten, unable to remember my own name," I said, and I could hear the anger in my own voice now, no longer bothering to hide it. This wasn't business negotiation. This wasn't even aggressive tactics. This was criminal conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse, fraud, and theft. This was a family plotting to destroy their own father and grandfather for money. When the presentation ended, you could have heard a pin drop in that massive boardroom. The silence was absolute and damning. Marcus tried to stand, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor, but Margaret Rodriguez, who controlled 8% of the company and had 30 years of industry experience, was faster. "I move for immediate termination of Marcus Bennett as CEO of this company," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a sharp blade, each word precise and final. "Effective immediately, with cause, no severance package." "Seconded," said Robert Phillips without hesitation, his voice firm. "All in favor?" I asked, looking around the table. 10 hands rose without hesitation, without even a moment's pause. The only people who didn't vote were Marcus and William, and their votes didn't matter anymore. They had no power left. "Motion carried unanimously," I said. "Mr. Bennett, you are hereby terminated from all positions within this company, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building." That's when Marcus completely lost control. The composed businessman, the man who'd threatened to destroy an elderly family member for personal gain, who'd plotted and schemed and manipulated, crumbled like a sand castle hit by a wave. He pushed back from the table and actually got down on his knees on that expensive carpet. He crawled across the floor toward my chair with tears streaming down his face, his expensive suit getting wrinkled and dirty. "Please, Richard," he sobbed, his voice breaking completely. "I did it for the family, for Emma, for our children's future. You can't destroy everything we've built, everything I've worked for. Please, I'm begging you. I'll do anything, anything you ask." I looked down at this man who'd been ready to lock me away in a memory care unit, who'd recruited his own wife to betray her father, who'd conspired to steal everything I'd worked for my entire life. "I'm not destroying anything, Marcus," I said quietly, and there was sadness in my voice now, genuine sorrow for what could have been. "I'm saving my daughter from a husband who would sell his own family for a development deal and a bigger corner office. I'm protecting her future, not destroying it." Security was already at the door because I'd arranged for that in advance. 2 uniformed guards lifted Marcus from the floor with professional efficiency and escorted him out. His company car, his corporate credit cards, his access to all accounts, everything was terminated the moment he left the building. His severance package consisted of whatever personal items were in his desk drawer. After 25 years of investing in this company, watching it grow from near bankruptcy to spectacular success, protecting it through recessions and market crashes and industry downturns, I wasn't about to let him walk away with millions in golden parachute payments. The months that followed taught me something I should have known all along, something Catherine tried to tell me before she passed away. The greatest inheritance you can leave your children isn't money in the bank or property or investments. It's the wisdom to recognize good character when they see it, the strength to stand up for what's right even when it's difficult, the courage to walk away from people who don't value them. Emma filed for divorce 3 weeks later. She moved back into my house on Cedar Lane, the house Marcus had wanted to steal, and we spent long evenings on the front porch talking about everything. About the signs she'd missed, about the man Marcus had pretended to be versus who he really was underneath. About forgiveness and second chances and learning from our mistakes. She cried a lot during those conversations. Cried for the marriage that had failed, for the future she'd imagined that would never happen, for the father she'd almost betrayed. But she was strong, my Emma. Stronger than she knew. I should have defended you, she told me one evening as the sun set over Cedar Lane. When they pulled out those papers, when they started talking about taking your house, I should have told them to go to hell. I should have walked out right then. You were caught in an impossible situation, I said, taking her hand. He manipulated you, made you believe that what they were doing was actually helping me. That's what people like Marcus do. They twist reality until you can't tell right from wrong anymore. The riverfront development never happened. Without my property for the access road, the entire project collapsed. Marcus lost everything in the divorce, his reputation destroyed, his career in ruins. Last I heard, he was working as a project manager for a small firm in another state, starting over from the bottom. William and Patricia don't speak to me anymore. That's perfectly fine. I never liked them much anyway. But Emma and I, we're closer now than we've ever been. She's working at Thompson & Associates now, not because of nepotism, but because she earned her position. She started in project management and works her way up through actual merit, actual accomplishment. She's good at it too, better than Marcus ever was. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show people who they really are when they think nobody important is watching. Because that's when their true nature reveals itself, when the masks come off and you see what's really underneath all the polish and pretense. I learned that night that the greatest weapon you can carry isn't money or power or influence. It's the truth that nobody expects. The truth that changes everything in a single moment. And sometimes, just sometimes, the people who underestimate you, who look down on you and treat you like you're worthless, those are the people who need to learn that lesson most of all. My name is Richard Thompson. I'm 58 years old. I own an $800 million company. And I still drive that beat-up old truck, still live in my modest house on Cedar Lane, still clip coupons at the grocery store. Because real wealth isn't about what you show the world. It's about knowing who you are when nobody's watching, when nobody's keeping score. And that's worth more than all the marble mansions in the world.